A family of 4 went missing during a trip to the island. They were believed to be victims of a tragic storm accident. But 3 weeks later, a wildlife camera captured something that made everyone question what had really happened. It revealed a dark truth so unimaginable that no one could have conceived it. Before we begin, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is over there. It really means a lot to know that you're with us. We're going through this together. Now let me tell you what really happened. The wind howled across the small island, carrying with it the biting chill of the approaching winter. Elena Dubois stood at the ship's railing, feeling each gust of wind brushing against her skin. She was no longer young, but she stood firm, like a pillar in every circumstance. At the age of 67, she disembarked with slow but confident steps, her worn walking shoes crunching on the island's icy trail. Elena gazed into the distance, seeing the jagged cliffs and vast beaches surrounding the desolate island. Visibility was poor as dark clouds began to gather, but she wasn't worried. This was her first time setting foot on the island, yet the landscape felt strangely familiar. The trails and mountain ranges appeared vividly in her memory. She had spent her life walking paths like these, and today she had come here with one purpose: to search for the Dubois family. After leaving the ship, she followed a narrow trail leading to a rustic cabin-style lodge, a familiar resting point for hikers. Smoke rose from the chimney. The sturdy wooden roof nestled beneath the canopy of ancient forest trees in the silence of untamed nature. As she entered the lodge's lobby, the fatigue of her long journey momentarily lifted at the sight of a familiar face. "Ms. Dubois?" The receptionist looked up and smiled. "Didn't expect you to get here this early." "Hello," Elena greeted, her voice steady with resolve. Elisa leaned forward, her expression stilling at the seriousness in Elena's eyes. "We're so sorry. The police said you'd be coming to find out more. Any news about your family?" Elena shook her head, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. A fleeting sorrow passed through her gaze, but it was quickly replaced by a resolute light. The whole town knew about the Dubois family tragedy. Her son, Matthew, along with his wife Aurelia and their twin children, Leo and Esme, had been missing for nearly a month. What began as an ordinary weekend getaway had turned into a nightmare. "Not yet," Elena replied, unzipping her coat. "That's why I'm here." Elisa nodded, her expression somber, as though feeling the weight of Elena's grief. Everyone in town knew of the family's mysterious disappearance. Missing person flyers had been distributed everywhere, but there was still no trace, no explanation for what had happened. The hiking trails had been searched, but all that was found was a chilling silence. Elena took a stack of missing person flyers from her backpack. The top flyer bore a photo of the smiling family of 4. Matthew in a green t-shirt, Aurelia with her warm smile, Leo in a bright yellow shirt, and Esme in purple. The girls' identical smiles showed the same gaps where baby teeth had recently fallen out. "I'd like to put these up to replace the old ones," she said, holding the stack out to Tom. "Around the lodge, the beaches, the cliffs nearby." "Of course," Elisa replied immediately. "We'll help you. The manager already agreed. He asked me to tell you that if you need anything, just ask." "Thank you, Tom," Elena said, grateful for the kindness the locals had shown her throughout the search. She continued through the lodge, posting flyers on bulletin boards and near the entrances. With each flyer she put up, Elena recalled that trip, a typical Saturday morning when Matthew called to invite her along. "Come with us, Mom," he had said over the phone, his voice still playful as ever. "Leo and Esme have been asking for Grandma Elena's stories all week." She had wanted to go, but she had already committed to a charity event and couldn't cancel. After it ended, she promised she'd join them on the next trip. "Take lots of pictures for me," she told him. And they did. Around midday, as she was setting up booths for the event, her phone buzzed with a message from Matthew. It was a perfect family photo, 4 of them beaming happily against a beach backdrop. She smiled, seeing how joyful they looked. A few hours later, after the event ended and Elena returned home, she noticed several missed calls from Matthew. Another message: "Weather's getting worse. We're cutting the trip short." She tried calling back immediately, but her call went to voicemail. Aurelia's phone had no signal either. Elena told herself not to worry, knowing how spotty reception was in that area. But as night fell and they still hadn't returned, her concern turned to fear. That night she called the police. By morning, search teams were combing the beaches around the island. Community volunteers joined in. Many remembered Matthew as the boy who once tagged along with his mother, a swimmer. But after a week of exhaustive searching, there were no signs. The police began to suggest the possibility of an accident, but she didn't believe it. Elena knew Matthew would never put his family in danger like that. She was certain something was wrong. She was determined not to stop, to keep searching even if everyone else gave up. If no one could find her family, she would do it herself. As she posted the next flyer, she couldn't help but think of the last family photo Matthew had sent. A happy family, all smiles, unaware of the fate awaiting them, something that would change everything. A young couple passed by, pausing to look at the flyer, then at her, their eyes filled with sympathy. She had grown used to such looks in the past weeks, but pity would not help her find her family. What she needed now wasn't sympathy. It was resolve. A strong sea wind swept across the sandy beach as Elena Dubois looked toward the mist-shrouded cliffs, feeling each step of her feet on the desolate island shore. This was her first time on the island, yet Elena felt as though she had known this place all her life. She paused, took a stack of flyers from her backpack with photos of the Dubois family, and began posting them on notice boards along the beach, near popular rest stops for visitors. With each flyer she posted, her heart tightened. The photos of Matthew, Aurelia, Leo, and Esme, 4 happy faces smiling against the beautiful backdrop of sea and sky, were now just memories. After a month of searching, there was still no news, but she couldn't give up. Elena had heard all the stories about the Dubois family trip, and everyone believed they might have had an accident. But she couldn't believe that. Matthew was experienced. She knew he would never let his family face danger without good reason. Her posting work stretched through the morning. Each time she approached a group of tourists or a local resident, she asked if they had seen the Dubois family. Every answer was the same: sympathetic eyes, shaking heads, and kind wishes. But no one had any new information. By the 20th time with no leads, she felt the sting of disappointment begin to creep in. But just as she prepared to post another flyer on a signpost about 2 miles ahead, a figure emerged from the trees on her right. A man around 50, dressed in camouflage with an orange safety vest, walked toward her with confident strides. "Excuse me," he called out. "Would you mind if I take one of those flyers?" Elena turned and studied him. He looked like someone familiar with the wild, with a thick beard streaked with gray and sharp eyes that seemed to record everything around him. "Of course," she replied, handing him a flyer. "My name's Cal Jennings," he said, extending his hand. "Local fisherman. Been working these shores 30 years. Elena shook his hand. "Elena Dubois," she answered. "My friends call me Elena." Realizing who she was, Cal smiled. "I've heard about you, what you've done for this beach. I admire it," he said, a hint of respect in his eyes. Cal studied the flyer closely, his brow furrowing. "How long have they been missing?" "Almost a month," Elena replied. Cal reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small device. "You know, I think I should check this. I've got some wildlife cameras in the area." Elena's heart leapt. "You think there might be something on them? Something worth looking at?" Cal began scrolling through the device screen, his manner serious and methodical as he reviewed each video. Elena couldn't hold back her curiosity, her voice catching. "What do you see, Cal?" He didn't answer right away, continuing to watch, occasionally glancing between the flyer and the screen. Then he stopped, his finger pausing on a particular clip. "Ms. Dubois, I think you should see this." He turned the screen toward Elena. The footage was grainy, with misty forest surroundings, but Elena's heart nearly stopped as three figures moved through the frame. A woman with shoulder-length hair and two children, all moving carefully through the brush. The woman wore a light-colored jacket, possibly pink or coral, while the children wore yellow and purple tops. "That's them," Elena whispered, her voice choked. "That's Aurelia and the kids." Cal nodded, his expression grave. "I thought so. Look at the timestamp." In the lower right corner of the screen, the date showed 3 days ago. 3 days, Elena stammered, flooded with disbelief and hope. "They're alive. But where's Matthew? My son should be with them." Cal zoomed in as far as possible, but only the three figures were visible. "This camera is fixed. It only catches what moves directly in front of it. Your son could be behind them or taking another path. There's no way to tell from this clip." Elena stared at the still frame, trying to absorb the image of her family. They looked tired and anxious, moving with the careful steps of people crossing unfamiliar terrain. At one point, they glanced briefly in the camera's direction, but seemed not to notice it, likely because it was well hidden to monitor wildlife unnoticed. "Where was this recorded?" Elena asked, her voice taut with urgency. Cal pulled up a GPS map on his device and pointed to a marked spot. "Here, deep in the northern area, about 8 miles from here." The terrain there was rugged, filled with high sea cliffs not shown on maps and unstable slopes worsened by recent storms. Elena looked at the map, realization dawning. "That's outside the search zone," she said, remembering how the police had never looked there because they said the area was too dangerous, with no maintained trails and high risk of landslides. "That's right, not the kind of place a family with young children would head into," Elena concluded. "That's why no one thought to look there." "Cal, I need a copy of that footage," Elena said urgently. "I have to get this to the police immediately." Cal nodded, already transferring the file. "I can email it to you right now." He scribbled his phone number on a small scrap of paper and handed it to Elena. "Call me if you need anything. I know the northern area well." "Thank you," Elena said, her voice soft with emotion. "This is the first real lead we've had in weeks. I hope it helps." Cal nodded, meeting her eyes with sympathy. "I hope you find them safe." After finishing the transfer, Cal checked his watch. "I have to get back. It's getting late and I've got enough data." He patted Elena's shoulder. "You gonna be all right?" "Yes," Elena said, clutching the phone with the precious footage. "I'm heading back to the cabin to call the police right away." They walked part-way together down the easier path. Elena felt determination surge through each step. She knew her family was alive, at least 3 days ago. The police would have to restart the search. They would have to look in the places they had once ignored. For the first time in many long weeks of despair, she felt real hope. When Elena Dubois returned to the cabin, her heart felt heavy, but also surged with powerful determination. For the first time in many long weeks of despair, she felt a glimmer of hope. She finally had a real lead. However, uncovering the truth behind that video was still a huge challenge, and she needed to do everything she could to find her family. As soon as she stepped into the cabin, Elena immediately took out her phone and called the police station. Anxiety made her hand tremble slightly as she scrolled to the number of Detective Marshall, the lead officer handling her family's missing persons case. "Detective Marshall, this is Marshall," his voice came through the line. "Hello, Detective. This is Elena Dubois," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I found evidence that my family is alive." A brief pause, then Marshall asked, "What evidence, Ms. Dubois?" Footage from a monitoring camera. It captured Aurelia and the kids moving through the forest 3 days ago, Elena explained. I met a man named Cal Jennings and sent the video to him. I'll forward it to you now. We need to restart the search immediately. Elena paused as she glanced out the cabin window where the faint afternoon light was fading. It was nearly dusk. It's almost 4 o'clock, and at this time of year, darkness falls fast in these remote areas. That certainly might be your family, Marshall agreed after a moment, but continued. However, Ms. Dubois, we cannot begin a search right now. What do you mean? Elena asked, confusion and disbelief rising in her voice. We understand your urgency, Marshall replied, his voice calm. But as you know better than anyone from your years as a ranger, night searches in this terrain are extremely dangerous. The area you describe is rugged, darkness is coming, and conditions will only worsen. Elena stood and walked to the window, seeing rangers guiding tourists back toward the lodge area. Dark clouds are gathering over the cliffs, and the forecast calls for heavy rain and storms tonight, Marshall continued. We can't risk sending teams into unmarked territory with worsening weather and limited visibility. That would only create more potential victims. Elena knew he was right. She had taken part in enough rescue missions to understand the procedure and the reasons behind it. What about helicopters? She asked, hoping for another option. Not in these conditions, and definitely not at night, Marshall answered. Besides, from what I saw in the video, they don't appear to be in immediate danger. They're moving with purpose, not like they're badly injured or lost. Elena sat down in her chair, feeling disappointment flood over her. Her family was so close, yet she couldn't reach them. She knew she would have to wait until morning. So we wait until morning? Elena asked. Yes, Marshall said. Tomorrow morning we'll coordinate with the Park Service and reorganize the search teams. I promise we'll do everything we can to find them. Elena replied, her voice tinged with reluctance. I understand, but I want to be part of the search team. With your experience, I think we can arrange that, Marshall said. Be at the police station by 6 a.m. After hanging up, Elena sat in silence for a few minutes, staring at a photo of her family on her phone. They were alive. But why wasn't Matthew in the footage? Why wasn't he with them? Elena knew Matthew would never abandon his family, especially the children. She stood and went to the window again, looking out at the growing darkness. She knew her family was enduring another night in the wilderness. Hold on, she whispered, her breath fogging the cold glass. Just hold on until morning. As night fell, the cabin felt increasingly suffocating. The walls seemed to close in, and the silence magnified the anxious thoughts racing through her mind. She decided to join the communal dinner at the lodge instead of staying alone, hoping to keep herself from sinking too deep into worry. Elena ate a little bit of noodles, just enough to ease her hunger, then quietly stood up. No one noticed her departure as she made her way toward her cabin, but inside she was filled with determination. She was ready for any challenge. She gathered her waterproof gear, tools that had accompanied her through many adventures in the wild, layers of rainproof jackets, sturdy boots, and her rescue backpack were neatly packed with all the essentials: first aid kit, survival tools, flashlight, and energy bars. She checked her GPS again, making sure both online and offline maps were loaded. Cal Jennings's coordinates were marked, and she packed extra batteries. She also stuffed some dried food and a sleeping bag into her pack, enough to keep warm through cold nights. A hint of anxiety crept into her mind, but a voice inside wouldn't let her retreat. If anyone could overcome this challenge, it was her. And if anyone could find her family, it was Elena Dubois. When everything was ready, Elena quietly stepped out of the cabin, avoiding the main paths so no one would see her. The rain grew heavier, water starting to pool on the ground. She pulled the flashlight from her pocket, but didn't turn it on yet, not wanting to draw attention. She passed the low wooden cabins, following a trail leading toward the high cliffs. She chose a less used path, avoiding maintained routes because she knew she needed to head into areas no one would think to search. The trail wasn't easy, and in the dark, as the rain poured harder, it became even more treacherous. Each step was guided by her unwavering determination. Time passed. As Elena climbed uphill, the rain intensified, reducing her visibility to just a few paces. She checked her GPS constantly to ensure she was on course. The temperature dropped sharply, the wind picked up, and the rain blurred what little she could see. An hour passed. 2 hours passed. In the silence, there was only the sound of rain and wind. Elena didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She knew her family, especially her 2 granddaughters, needed her. She had to find them. Suddenly, in what felt like an endless expanse of darkness and rain, she saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. She stopped, squinting, thinking it might be a trick of her mind, but no, the light was real and growing closer. A small house appeared through the white curtain of rain, nestled among the trees. A house. A flicker of hope rose in Elena, even though she knew it might be her last bit of luck. She approached the house carefully, each step cautious. As she drew closer, she saw a thin wisp of smoke rising from the chimney, proof someone was inside. Elena paused, her hands trembling from cold and tension. She knocked on the door, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone there? I need help." At first, there was no response. She knocked again, harder, calling louder. Then the door slowly opened. Elena found herself looking at a face she had only seen in photos and on missing person flyers for the past 3 weeks. Aurelia stood there, stunned, her eyes wide with shock. For a second, both women were silent. Then Aurelia quickly stepped forward, pulling Elena inside. "Elena, how did you get here?" Aurelia stammered, helping her peel off the rain-soaked outer jacket. As soon as she stepped inside, Elena heard the voices of 2 children from behind a wooden chair. "Mom, who is it?" Esme and Leo appeared, their eyes wide when they recognized her. "Grandma Elena!" they shouted in unison, running toward her, then pausing, a little hesitant and unsure. Elena knelt down, overwhelmed and exhausted, tears filling her eyes as she hugged them. The warmth of the house began to thaw her frozen body, the cold and aches finally fading. Aurelia quickly returned with a mug of hot milk for Elena, urging her to drink and warm up. Elena looked at her grandchildren, relieved to see them alive, but worry churned inside her. Aurelia hadn't yet given her the answer she desperately needed. The question Elena knew she had to ask. "Aurelia, where's Matthew?" Aurelia turned back, her face darkening at the mention of Matthew's name. She walked over to the small wooden table in the room and sat down, motioning for Elena to sit across from her. Elena sat, holding the mug of hot milk, but it did nothing to soothe the worry gnawing at her. She looked around the simple but warm room, and everything here spoke of impermanence, as though they were hiding from something. "Aurelia," Elena whispered, "what happened? Where is Matthew?" Aurelia looked down, her hands gripping the mug, her eyes clouding over. She let out a quiet sigh, then spoke, her voice so weak it was almost inaudible. "We got into an accident," she said, barely above a whisper. "That day, when we were out exploring the beach, we didn't check the weather carefully. The heavy rain came suddenly, and we got trapped." Elena felt a chill run down her spine as Aurelia continued, "We found this house. It saved us that first night." Elena sat silently, turning over Aurelia's words in her mind. She couldn't understand why Matthew would bring the family out here to a dangerous area, completely against the careful nature he'd always shown before. "But why are you here?" Elena asked, keeping her voice steady. "This area is dangerous, according to the island's maps. Matthew knew that. He would never bring the kids somewhere like this." Aurelia paused, her eyes full of conflict. "He wanted to try a new spot on the island," she whispered. "Matthew thought if we went somewhere less crowded, it would be more exciting. He said we'd go along the lower rocky beaches where he thought it was safer. She stopped for a moment, wiping her tears. But then the rain came so fast. It was too dangerous to turn back. We could only keep moving forward. Elena looked into Aurelia's eyes, sensing the pain and regret there. But she still didn't have an answer to her biggest question. Where was Matthew? So where is Matthew, Aurelia? Elena pressed, her voice worried. Maybe he went for help, didn't he? Aurelia lowered her head, gripping the mug tighter, but said nothing. Elena felt the thick silence in the room. After a long while, Aurelia finally spoke, her voice breaking. The next morning, when the rain eased a little, Matthew said he'd go find help. He thought if he could get to a spot with cell signal or find a fisherman, he could save us. He promised he'd come back. Aurelia paused, eyes wide as though replaying every moment. But I waited all day and he never returned. Another storm came, even worse than before. I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave the kids. Elena felt her heart seize. So you never found him? She whispered, as though she couldn't bear the truth. Aurelia shook her head, tears falling. No, I didn't find him. I searched in the days after, but the rain kept coming. Conditions were terrible. I couldn't go far, and I couldn't leave the kids alone. She took a long breath, trying to steady herself. We were trapped here. I couldn't leave without knowing if Matthew was alive. Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. She knew Matthew was cautious, that he'd have done everything to keep the family safe. But something was wrong. Why was Aurelia still here, in this cabin, after Matthew went to find help? The story didn't add up. So you think he's dead, don't you? Elena asked, her voice catching. Aurelia didn't answer right away. She looked toward the small bed where the kids were sleeping, then lowered her gaze. I don't know for sure, but it's been 3 weeks. I've had to accept it. He couldn't have survived out there this long. Elena felt a tearing pain in her chest. Losing a son was unimaginable. But looking at the innocent faces of her granddaughters, she knew she had to stay strong for them. No matter how painful the truth, she had to protect them. One question echoed in Elena's mind. Do the kids know Aurelia? Do they understand what happened? Aurelia shivered slightly, then lowered her head. They started to realize in the 2nd week. They kept asking about Matthew. I had to tell them that their dad might not come back. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Elena's heart ached thinking of the children facing such a cruel truth. Esme and Leo were still too young to understand life's complexity, and now they were in a world without their father, without the comfort of a normal mother. Elena stood and walked to the window, the light from the yard lamp casting a long shadow across the floor. Everything felt overwhelming, but she knew she had to keep going. Her granddaughters needed her protection more than ever. She wouldn't let them suffer anymore. Aurelia, I have to ask you again, Elena said, her voice steely with resolve. Where is Matthew? You can't just give up like this. Aurelia paused, then lowered her head again, but when she looked up, her eyes were brimming with tears. I don't know, Aurelia said, her voice choked. He went for help, but I never saw him again. I don't know what happened. A heavy silence filled the room, and Elena felt a deep, dark truth settle over them. She couldn't grasp the whole story yet, but one thing she knew for certain. Her family couldn't live in this darkness any longer. She would find the truth, no matter the cost. Elena froze for a moment, the cold sinking into every cell of her body. She looked at Aurelia, trying to read her daughter-in-law's expression, but saw nothing except exhaustion and tension. The warm yellow glow of the oil lamp on the table cast a fragile veneer of comfort, but inside Elena, that warmth was only a thin shell. She stood up, walking around the house, a place that seemed almost too carefully kept. Though the heavy rain lashed the windows like whips, inside there was dry wood stacked neatly, every pile arranged with care. Boxes of canned food sat untouched, their seals unbroken, with no sign of shortage or struggle against the storm. The entire place felt like a deliberate refuge, as though they were here not out of necessity, but for some other reason, one she couldn't quite touch. Elena passed a small wooden table with a few half-finished cups of tea. This room, though small, was complete. A few scattered wall hangings adorned the cabin, and something about the silence in this place filled Elena with unease. She turned back to look at Aurelia's face again, searching for something in her eyes, but only received coldness in return. As she moved toward the corner of the cabin, Elena spotted something small glinting under the dim lamplight. She bent down and picked it up. It was Matthew's wedding ring. Elena's heart clenched, her fingers trembling as she held the ring. The lamp's light reflected on its surface, revealing scratches, marks of time. "Aurelia, why is Matthew's wedding ring here?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. Aurelia turned around, her gaze blank. She forced a smile, but it was thin. "Maybe he took it off when it got cold, to keep his hands from going numb," she answered, but there was no certainty in her voice. Elena looked at the ring in her hand, then stared directly into Aurelia's eyes. "Matthew never took off this ring," she said slowly. "He told me once. It was a daily reminder of the love you shared." Silence. The world seemed to freeze for a long moment. Aurelia didn't answer, only turned her face away. Elena felt a tension she couldn't explain. Her instincts, honed by years in the wilderness, screamed that something was wrong. A chill slithered up her spine, like some hidden danger was lurking. Elena decided to step outside, to breathe in the cold air and quiet the tightness in her chest. She turned, but just as she did, a sudden, violent blow struck her head. The world went blurry, darkness swallowing her vision. Pain threatened to pull her under. When Elena regained consciousness, she was lying in darkness. Her head throbbed, her hands bound tightly behind her back with rope. The sharp smell of gas filled her nose, making it hard to breathe. Gritting her teeth, she rolled toward the small dagger tucked in her boot. Her numb fingers wrapped around the hilt, carefully sawing through the rope. Waves of pain radiated from her head, forcing her to close her eyes and focus. Fire began to creep up the corner of the cabin, flames licking at the dry wooden walls. Elena clenched her teeth, fighting panic, cutting until the rope snapped. The weight of life and death pressed against her as she lunged for the window, smashing the glass and climbing out just as the cabin exploded behind her. Rain slammed into her face, icy and stinging, but Elena didn't stop. She crawled across the snow, struggling to stay upright in the storm. Wind howled in her ears, making them ring, but in the quiet roar of the rain, she heard a faint cry ahead. Elena stopped, listening. She followed the sound and found Leo, abandoned in the snow, his leg clearly injured. His face was pale and frozen, tears streaming as he cried out for her. "Grandma," Leo whimpered, his voice weak and trembling with fear. "Mom left me, said I was slowing her down, and she could only take Esme." Elena felt her heart crack. She wrapped Leo in her coat, checking his leg. Broken, but salvageable. She splinted it with sticks and cloth, then hoisted the boy onto her back, ignoring her own exhaustion. Each step through the snow was a fight for life itself. For nearly 6 hours, Elena crawled, slipped, and dragged herself through ice and sleet, pouring every last ounce of strength into bringing Leo back toward the lodge. She didn't rest, didn't stop. With every step she repeated in her head, "Survive, for Matthew, for the children." Finally, when she could go no farther, Elena saw the lodge lights glowing in the distance. The thick snow had not stopped her. She had done it. Elena and Leo stepped into the safe area, exhausted. The heavy rain had stopped, and the cold wind made their skin shiver. Neither of them said a word, but Elena felt a small measure of relief knowing she had protected Leo. Her heart still ached thinking of Esme, but she couldn't allow herself to collapse. As they neared a small hut on the edge of the forest, Nicholas Lemoyne was waiting for them. His expression was worried, but when he saw Elena and Leo safe, he exhaled in relief. "We need to talk," Elena said, her voice firm. Nicholas looked at her, then down at the ground, as though preparing to say something he'd kept hidden. "What's wrong, Nicholas?" Elena asked, unable to hide the tension in her voice. "The video, you helped me, but I feel like there's something you're not telling me." Nicholas didn't answer right away. He hesitated for a moment, then sighed. Elena stared at him, sensing his unease in every movement. "Elena, I saw Matthew die," Nicholas finally said, his voice low and heavy. Elena felt her knees buckle. She looked at him, unable to believe what she had just heard. What did you say?" Elena asked again, her voice trembling. "What did you see?" Nicholas stared off into the distance as though trying to recall the memory. "When I came back from my hunting trip, I saw Aurelia there. She was standing on the cliff, looking at Matthew." He fell silent for a moment, then continued, "And then she pushed Matthew." Elena froze. She couldn't speak. Nicholas continued, his voice heavy, as though recounting an unforgettable nightmare. "Matthew fell off the high cliff, and I saw him tumble into the sea. I couldn't do anything. At that moment I saw the two children nearby, Esme and Leo. They saw everything." Elena felt the cold wind from outside seep into her bones. Leo stood silently, not fully understanding the conversation between Elena and Nicholas. She looked down at Leo, heart-breaking, but couldn't allow herself to weaken. "So Aurelia killed Matthew," Elena said into the silence. She felt as though she had been torn from reality, as though she were trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Nicholas nodded, his eyes heavy. "After that, she tried to bribe me. Aurelia promised me a lot of money if I kept quiet about Matthew's death. I didn't take the money, but she kept pressing me." Nicholas paused, looking at Elena with regret in his eyes. "Do you know why I'm telling you this?" Nicholas asked, his voice lowering. "Because I can't live with this guilt anymore. Aurelia pushed him to get the insurance money and live in lies. You need to know the truth." Elena stayed silent, feeling like her entire world was collapsing. She couldn't understand why Aurelia would do such a thing. She had always thought of Aurelia as someone who loved her family, a sacrificing wife and mother. But now, the truth suffocated her. "So Aurelia won't leave me alone, will she?" Elena finally said, her voice steady. "She'll have to pay for what she's done." Nicholas nodded, relieved to have finally spoken the truth. "You'll have to face her. You'll get the answers you want, but you need to be ready." Elena thanked Nicholas with a nod. She understood things were clearer now, but this was only part of a much bigger story, and she wouldn't stop until Aurelia faced the truth. She wouldn't let Matthew's death mean nothing, and she would protect her grandchildren to the very end. When Elena and Leo left the safe area, their steps were heavier than ever. Elena called the police using Nicholas's phone, giving them all the evidence she had, determined to expose the truth about her son's death. The police had completed the arrest of Aurelia, the woman Elena had once loved like a daughter, and taken her to the hospital for treatment. The charges of murdering her husband, attempted murder, and other crimes awaited her ahead. Yet for Elena, this did not feel like victory. All she felt was emptiness and pain when faced with the brutal truth. Elena walked into the hospital room where Aurelia was sitting on the bed, her hollow eyes staring down at her hands. The room was so silent you could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Aurelia still held a cold expression, though her shoulders sagged like a hunted animal. Elena stood silently in the doorway, staring at the woman who had once been her daughter-in-law. Her heart felt like a stone, unmoved by sympathy. Aurelia may have taken Matthew's life, but that loss could not be replaced by any apology. "Aurelia," Elena said, her voice firm but full of pain, You know I won't let this go. I won't let you live in lies." Aurelia looked up at her, her eyes like a quiet storm hidden behind a glassy surface. "You don't understand, Elena," she said, her voice low, still trying to blame circumstance. "You don't know everything I had to endure." Elena stepped closer to the bed, never blinking as she stared at Aurelia. "You think I don't understand? You killed Matthew. You killed the man I loved most. Do you think you can pin this guilt on someone else?" Aurelia lowered her head, her hands gripping the hospital blanket. "I couldn't take it anymore. Matthew had changed. He didn't love me anymore. He was cheating. He wanted to leave me. We weren't a family anymore, Elena." Elena clenched her fists, trembling with anger. "You had no right to kill him just because he wanted to leave you. You had no right!" Elena shouted, her voice echoing in the hospital room. Aurelia raised her head, her eyes wide but not in fear, in desperation. "You don't understand. I knew he was going to leave. I couldn't let everything fall apart. He planned to leave me, leave the kids, the feeling of betrayal. It ate at me, Elena. I couldn't accept it." Elena couldn't hold back any more. She stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "So you think you had the right to kill him? Just because he wanted to leave, you decided to steal his life, steal the future from my grandchildren?" Aurelia lowered her head, her voice breaking. "If Matthew died while we were still legally married, I'd get $2 million in life insurance. It was the perfect plan to save us from bankruptcy. I had no choice. He abandoned us, but I couldn't let it end that way." Elena stared at her, all sympathy gone. "You planned to kill him, and you thought there wouldn't be consequences?" Elena leaned closer, her eyes burning. "You killed him, Aurelia, just for money. You didn't just kill your husband, you destroyed all of us." Aurelia broke down crying, tears streaming down her pale face. I couldn't control myself. I thought killing him would protect my children, but I couldn't bear the idea of being abandoned. That video of him with that woman, I couldn't stand it anymore. And then the life insurance. $2 million. That was all I had left." Elena stood silently, her heart filled with anger and grief. Aurelia's words cut into her like sharp blades, but she couldn't break down. She wouldn't let the pain overwhelm her. "You destroyed everything. You killed Matthew. And now you've killed the spirit of our family, of our children." Aurelia looked up at her, eyes full of anguish. "I know I was wrong, but I can't go back. I pushed everything to the edge." Elena closed her eyes, a wave of sorrow washing over her. Losing Matthew was a pain beyond words, but now she knew what she had to do. She couldn't let her grandchildren continue living in this darkness. "I won't let you keep destroying everything," Elena said, her voice softer but more resolute than ever. "I will protect my grandchildren, Aurelia. No matter what you've done, I won't let them suffer because of you." Aurelia bowed her head, her hand shaking. I just want it all to end. I can't take it any more." Elena looked at her, feeling hollow inside. Aurelia was no longer the daughter-in-law she had once loved. She had betrayed not just Matthew, but herself and their entire family. After Aurelia was arrested and transferred to a psychiatric hospital for treatment, Elena returned to Leo and Esme. She knew they needed her now more than ever. Though her heart still ached for Matthew, she couldn't let her grandchildren live in fear and uncertainty. With unwavering determination and unconditional love, Elena would be their protector. She would help them understand that the truth could be painful, but she would be by their side, helping them overcome the grief and find peace again in life. Elena sat by the window of the small cabin, the faint light of the late afternoon streaming through the frosted glass. The snow outside had stopped falling, but the air was still bitterly cold, silent like the pain in her heart. She looked out into the distance, where mountains rose high and the sky darkened, like the emptiness she had felt these past days. The feeling of losing Matthew remained a deep wound that would never heal. Each morning she woke up and felt the silence. She still heard his laughter in her mind, saw his face in every quiet moment. These past days, Elena had tried to stay strong to keep everything steady, but she could not deny that the pain of losing her beloved son weighed on her every step. But in that loss, Elena could not allow herself to collapse. She glanced at her two grandchildren sitting together on the small bench in the corner of the room, their innocent faces clouded with grief. Esme and Leo, they had witnessed their father's death, and each day they struggled with nightmares and terrible memories. She stood up, walked over to them, and gently sat down beside them. Esme looked up, her eyes red as though she had been crying all night. Leo glanced up briefly before looking back down, his small shoulders hunched as though trying to hide from the world. "Are you okay?" Elena asked, her voice soft but full of concern and care. Esme shook her head slightly, her mouth opening as though to say something but then falling silent. Leo said nothing, his small hands clutching the blanket as though holding on to something familiar in a world he could not understand. "I know you're hurting, and I'm hurting too," Elena continued, her voice catching. "But I'll always be here for you. I'll help you get through this, no matter what happens." Esme finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Grandma, why did Dad have to go? Can he come back?" Elena felt her heart break at the question. There was no easy answer. The truth of Matthew's death was too cruel, too painful, but she knew she could not let them live in the shadows of silence. "Esme, your dad loved you so much. He wanted you to be happy, and he'll always live in your heart, even if he's not here anymore," Elena said, her voice steady, though her own heart was shattering. Leo looked up, his eyes filled with hurt. "Dad would never want to leave. He would never leave us," he whispered, his voice weak but carrying infinite sadness. "No, he would never leave you. He loved you more than anything in this world," Elena answered, as though reassuring herself as much as them. "And you'll always have me here. I'll take care of you." In that silent moment, Elena felt an invisible force connecting her and the children. She could not change the past, but she could help them build a future. Every day, she would be their guide, protecting them from the terror they had lived through. From then on, Elena began to talk with them each day, patiently listening to the questions they couldn't answer, sharing beautiful memories of Matthew, helping them slowly learn to cope with their grief. Leo's nightmares no longer haunted him every night, and Esme began to smile softly when talking about her father. Every morning, Elena woke early, taking them outside for exercises, breathing in the fresh air. She tried to create a safe and warm space for them, where they could feel peace, even as the world kept changing. She helped them heal from their physical wounds. Leo had fully recovered, running and playing like before. But more importantly, she helped them heal from the emotional wounds, showing them that no matter the pain, family was a place where love and protection never disappeared. During all this, Elena also faced her own pain. Each night when the children slept, she sat alone, looking at old photos of Matthew. But she knew as long as the children were with her, she would never give up. "Dad will never really leave, right?" Esme asked one night, her eyes shining as she hugged Elena tightly. Elena held her close, her voice steady. "No, Esme. He'll always be in your heart, and I'll always be here, protecting you." Though the pain would never fully fade, Elena knew she had to be the strongest in this family, guiding them through the darkness into a new life where love and protection would always remain. Elena would do everything to give them a bright future, for Matthew, for her family, and for herself. When Elena entered Leo's room, she saw the boy sitting on the bed, clutching a pillow, staring blankly into space. But when she stepped in, He jolted and turned toward her, his eyes full of worry, as if he had just woken from a nightmare he couldn't escape. Though Leo's leg had healed from its injuries, the fear still wouldn't let him go. "Leo, are you okay?" Elena asked, her voice gentle but full of concern. She sat beside him, gently patting his shoulder. I can't sleep," Leo said, his eyes still teary. He looked into the darkness outside the window. "I'm scared. Scared Mom will leave me, like before." Elena was silent for a moment, feeling the confusion and fear in the boy. "I'm here with you, Leo. I won't leave you alone," Elena whispered, softly rubbing his back. She stayed there, patiently letting him calm down, not forcing him to talk more. All night, Leo couldn't sleep. He woke in terror, eyes wide in panic, screaming, "Mom, don't leave me. Don't leave me again." He sobbed, cold tears streaming down his cheeks. Elena rushed to him, hugging him tightly, comforting him in the dim light. "I'm here, Leo. I won't leave you alone," she whispered over and over, holding him close. She could feel his fear, knowing nothing could ease it right away. The boy still clung to the darkness of his painful memories. Every night was the same. Leo would wake constantly, his eyes searching for something he couldn't find. The nightmares haunted him, and each morning he felt the world slipping further away. Esme, meanwhile, had become quieter. She seemed unwilling to talk about Matthew, about family, about the sweet memories they once had. She avoided Elena's questions, and though she bore no physical wounds, the pain inside her was so deep it couldn't be seen. One morning, as Esme sat at the table, Elena tried to talk with her. "Esme, do you miss Dad?" Esme didn't answer right away. She just held her spoon, turning it slowly on her plate, as though trying to dodge the question. Finally, Esme looked up, her eyes sad. "Dad can't come back, can he, Grandma?" Her voice choked, but there were no tears. Elena sighed, sitting beside her. "No, sweetheart. He can't come back. But he'll always be in our hearts. He always loved you." Esme nodded slightly, eyes still downcast, saying nothing more. She didn't want to continue the conversation. Elena understood the truth was too painful for the girl to face. Too hard to accept that her own mother had caused her father to leave forever. Day after day, things didn't change much. Esme and Leo continued living with unseen wounds, but Elena knew they needed her more than ever. One afternoon, as Leo and Esme sat together on the sofa, Elena decided to tell them a story about Matthew. "Once, your dad tried to bake a cake for the whole family, but he burned it so badly," Elena began, trying to lighten the air. Esme looked up, her eyes brightening, and a gentle smile appeared on her lips. Everyone laughed when they saw the burnt cake, and Dad had to order takeout because no one dared eat it. Esme giggled, remembering the joyful moments, and for a brief instant the happy memories of Matthew returned. Leo, though still wary, joined in. "Dad always said I'd be an explorer, just like him. I want to go everywhere, see all the places he did." His eyes shone, his face no longer dark and worried. Elena smiled, hearing words she hadn't heard in so long. "That's right, Leo. Dad told me so much about your dreams. He'll always be with us in our stories, in the memories we share." Days passed, and Esme and Leo slowly returned to life. Not exactly as before, but at least they began finding joy in small moments. Though still sad, they began to see light in the darkness. Elena continued to stay by their side, listening, sharing, protecting. She knew she couldn't erase the pain, but her presence would help them find the strength to keep living. That morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, its rays casting patterns across the tablecloth in Elena's kitchen. The room felt warm, filled with the smell of freshly toasted bread. Elena was busy preparing breakfast for Leo and Esme, the two children she had promised to care for the rest of her life. Leo walked into the kitchen in his red tracksuit, his eyes lighting up when he saw the toast and fried eggs. "Grandma, "Today I want to draw a picture of Dad," he said, moving closer to the table and sitting down. Elena turned from the stove, smiling softly at the joy on his face. "How do you want to draw him?" she asked, her hands still busy with breakfast. Leo scratched his head, pulling a pencil from his pocket. "I want to draw Dad playing with me in the yard. He's smiling so big, Grandma." He looked at her, eyes shining, as though needing her to confirm it was the right thing to do. Elena set the plate of eggs on the table, then sat across from Leo. "If you draw him like that, you'll keep the happy memories of Dad in your heart." She gently brushed his hair back. Leo pulled out a sheet of paper, carefully beginning to draw while she continued making breakfast. A while later, Esme walked in, her hair loose, eyes sleepy. "Grandma, I'm hungry," she said, her voice drowsy. Elena got up and helped her into a chair. "Can you help, Grandma? I need you to cut the vegetables for the breakfast salad." Esme glanced at her, then at the steaming plate of eggs and toast on the table, but didn't say anything, only nodded. The three of them sat together around the table, Elena watching Leo and Esme with love and patience. It was a new day, one starting like any other, but something in the air told her that their lives, though difficult, were moving forward. After breakfast, Elena got up and started cleaning. Esme also got up, bringing her plate to the sink. She didn't talk much, but had begun helping with daily chores. Leo grabbed his school bag and said, "Grandma, today I'm going to draw Dad at school to show my friends." Elena turned, her eyes warm. "You draw Dad for your friends. That's a wonderful thing. And remember, Grandma wants to see your picture too." Esme turned back and looked at her, asking, "Grandma, when can we visit Dad?" Her voice was uncertain, as though she didn't want to make Elena sad. Elena paused, then gently answered, "Sweetheart, your Dad will always be in our hearts. Every time we remember him, we remember the happiest moments, like when he played with you in the yard." Elena leaned down, placing her hand on Esme's shoulder. "We'll keep living our lives happily and caring for each other, just like Dad taught us." Leo looked at her, then at Esme with determination. "I'm going to do great. I'm going to draw Dad every day." He gently patted his sister's shoulder, then headed outside. Esme stood for a moment, looking at Elena with an unreadable expression, then nodded and followed Leo. Elena watched the two children leave, silently grateful they could keep living, continuing on this new path, even though they hadn't yet forgotten the past. All that afternoon, Elena couldn't stop thinking about the journey she had begun. Even after losing her beloved son, she knew she couldn't stop. She had to protect her grandchildren, help them find happiness and joy, even in the hardest circumstances. As night fell, she sat in the quiet room, looking at Leo's drawing of his father, feeling a strange peace in her heart. She knew the road ahead was long, but she would never give up. No matter what, she would be the one to protect and care for her grandchildren until the end of her days. After the dark and challenging days, Elena looked back on the long journey she and the children had endured. The pain was still there, but she understood it wasn't the end. It was part of the healing path. Her grandchildren, Leo and Esme, were now slowly finding light after the deep darkness they had been pulled into. Though the psychological wounds weren't fully healed, Elena's presence, with her resilience and unwavering faith, showed them they could keep moving forward, even if the road was sometimes rough and full of stones. She showed them it's never too late to find peace, that no matter how hard things get, love and honesty will always be the light guiding their way. In court, justice finally spoke. Aurelia, the mother Leo and Esme once trusted, was convicted and held accountable for what she had done. Elena stood firm through every trial, even when facing the greatest pain of her life. She proved that sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, is the only path to peace and reconciliation. Each day, Elena reminded herself of the precious lessons life had taught her. Faith in justice, integrity, and the courage to face the truth are values that never fade. Even in the hardest moments, even on the longest nights without light, the bravery to do what is right would always lead people to the place of freedom and peace. Their story did not end with a perfect conclusion, but with a deep reminder of the power of love, justice, and faith. No matter how the world changes, no matter how life tests them, they stood strong. And above all, they knew those values would always guide them, like an unending light, never extinguished even in the darkest nights. Faith in justice, the courage to face the truth, and love are what will help them keep living, keep hoping, and keep fighting for themselves, for their family, and for a brighter future. And no matter the hardship, they would never give up, because they knew that as long as they never let go of hope, they would always find a way through.